It's 1853, and a new vaccination law has just come into effect. You're a parent in London. Your baby's only a few months old, and you haven't slept properly in weeks. The city is loud and crowded, thick with smoke from factories and coal fires. Disease isn't an abstract concept here. It's something people talk about in markets and narrow alleyways. It's something that visits homes. Then there's a knock at your door. A local official explains that under this new law, your child must be vaccinated against smallpox. It's no longer just recommended, it's required. And if you refuse, there will be a fine. You know what smallpox can do. Everyone does. You've seen the pitted scars on faces. You've heard stories of children who never recovered. No one doubts the danger. But you've heard other things too. You've heard that the vaccine comes from cows. You've heard that it's transferred from one child's arm to another's. You've heard rumors that some children became ill afterward. A neighbor swears her cousin's baby wasn't the same again. Now you're standing there, holding your child, and the decision feels heavier than it sounded a moment ago. That quiet hesitation, that private pause at the doorway, is where the first loud no to vaccination really began. Not in Parliament, not in a laboratory, but in ordinary homes where parents had to decide what they believed and who they trusted. Smallpox had haunted communities for centuries. It moved through cities and villages brutally. Roughly 3 out of every 10 people who caught it died. That's not a rare complication. That's nearly 1 in 3. And survival often came with a cost. Faces were permanently scarred. Some people lost their sight. Families remembered outbreaks the way they remembered wars, as before and after moments. Long before the word vaccine existed, people were already trying to find protection. There was a practice called variolation. It involved deliberately introducing material from a mild case of smallpox into someone healthy, hoping their body would develop immunity without the full force of the disease. It was a calculated risk. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Then, in the late 18th century, an English country doctor named Edward Jenner paid attention to something farmers had noticed for years. Milkmaids who caught cowpox, a much milder infection from cows, rarely developed smallpox later. Cowpox made them sick briefly, but they recovered, and afterward, they seemed protected. In 1796, Jenner tested the idea. He introduced cowpox material into the arm of a young boy. Later, he exposed the child to smallpox. The boy did not fall ill. That was the beginning of vaccination. From a distance, it looks clean and inevitable, a discovery, a solution, progress moving forward. But medicine at the time wasn't sterile or standardized. Vaccination was often done arm to arm. Material from one recently vaccinated child would be transferred directly to another. If the first child carried another infection, something doctors couldn't yet see or fully explain, that infection could pass along as well. Cases were uncommon, but the possibility was real. And rumor has always traveled faster than reassurance. So by the time vaccination became compulsory in 1853, trust wasn't simple. From the government's point of view, the logic felt straightforward. Smallpox still killed thousands. Vaccination reduced deaths. So Parliament made infant smallpox vaccination compulsory in England and Wales. Parents who refused were fined. Continued refusal meant repeated penalties. But law feels different from advice. Advice invites you in. Law presses. For many working families, especially in industrial cities where officials were already a part of daily life, this felt less like protection and more like intrusion. Inspectors could request proof that your child had been vaccinated. Court summonses followed if you didn't comply. Some parents faced fines again and again. The debate slowly shifted. It wasn't only about smallpox anymore. It became about authority, about who had the right to decide what happened to a child's body. By the 1860s and 1870s, opposition had organized itself. Groups formed across Britain, pamphlets circulated, meetings filled crowded halls. They didn't call themselves enemies of science. They described themselves as defenders of liberty. They spoke about parental rights, about bodily autonomy, about the fear of state overreach. In 1885, the city of Leicester became the center of one of the largest anti-vaccination demonstrations the world had seen. Tens of thousands marched through the streets. They carried banners and even burned an effigy of Jenner. Not because they denied that smallpox existed, everyone knew it did, but because they felt unheard. From a distance, it's easy to look back and label that resistance as ignorance. But when you stand closer to it, when you imagine yourself inside it, the emotions start to feel familiar. When people feel pushed, something in them pushes back, even if they understand the reasoning, even if the logic makes sense. The experience of being compelled changes how a decision feels. It stops being a choice and starts feeling like a test of control. And risk almost never feels mathematical. A rare side effect can loom larger than a common disease, especially if the disease hasn't visited your home in a while. When smallpox cases declined in certain towns, the urgency softened. The danger felt further away. And once a threat feels distant, protection can start to feel optional. Very few people refused vaccination because they rejected science outright. More often, they were reacting to what they didn't trust: the institutions enforcing the rule, the officials delivering the message, the feeling that something deeply personal had become public policy. Eventually, even lawmakers recognized that fines alone weren't resolving the conflict. In 1898, Parliament amended the vaccination law to include what was called a conscientious objection. Parents who formally declared sincere opposition could avoid penalties. It didn't end the debate. It was simply an acknowledgement that enforcement without public confidence has limits. At the same time, science was evolving. The idea that microscopic organisms caused disease, work advanced by scientists like Louis Pasteur in France, gradually made infection feel less mysterious. Sterilization techniques improved, vaccine production became more controlled, standards tightened, the process became more predictable. Over the decades, smallpox vaccination became routine in many parts of the world. And in 1980, after a coordinated global campaign led by the World Health Organization, smallpox was declared eradicated. A virus that had shaped human history for centuries was gone. Completely gone. It remains one of medicine's greatest achievements, but the story doesn't end there. Resistance didn't vanish with smallpox. It changed form. In the mid-20th century, another disease unsettled parents in a very similar way. Polio struck mostly children. It could begin like an ordinary fever and within days leave a child unable to walk, sometimes unable to breathe. In the 1940s and early 1950s, summer outbreaks closed swimming pools and emptied playgrounds. Hospitals filled with iron lungs, large machines that mechanically expanded and contracted a patient's chest so they could breathe. When an American scientist named Jonas Salk introduced a polio vaccine in 1955, it felt like relief had finally arrived. Church bells rang, newspapers celebrated, parents lined up. And then, weeks later, something went wrong. A manufacturing error at Cutter Laboratories allowed some batches of the vaccine to contain live poliovirus instead of the inactivated form. More than 200 children developed paralysis. Several died. Confidence faltered almost immediately. Vaccination programs paused while investigations unfolded. Production standards were revised. Oversight tightened. The science improved again, but emotionally, the pattern felt familiar. A frightening disease, a hopeful solution, a complication, renewed doubt. Even as medicine became more precise, the human reaction followed a rhythm that hadn't changed much since that doorway in 1853. Because at the center of every vaccination campaign, no matter the century, is still that private moment, a parent holding a child, trying to weigh protection against uncertainty, trying to decide who to trust. Public health has always been more than data points and laboratory results. It depends on relationships, on whether people feel informed or pressured, respected or dismissed, whether decisions feel shared or imposed. The first loud refusal to vaccination didn't halt progress. Smallpox was eradicated. Polio was pushed back dramatically. Lives were saved on a scale that's hard to fully grasp. But that first no revealed something that would follow medicine into every future breakthrough. Acceptance happens in living rooms, and trust, real trust, is never automatic. It's built slowly. It's tested often. It can thin quickly. If you step back now, the protests in Victorian England don't look like an interruption in progress. They look like the beginning of an ongoing conversation, because the tension was never only about a needle. It was about power, fear, uncertainty, and who gets to decide what enters a body. That question didn't disappear in 1885. It didn't disappear in 1955. And it likely won't disappear the next time a new vaccine appears. Somewhere, again, there will be a knock at a door, and someone will have to decide what to believe.